All right.
Okay.
So the
Well,
way I do it is we just jump into it.
okay.
Okay.
Sounds good.
But I'll give you a little intro. So, Mr. Sarkhan, how do you know me?
How do I know you? Well, we met.
We're married.
We're married. Yes, we are
You're
married.
about to go way back.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, we are married, of course. Yes, that's how I know you.
Yeah, that's so people know like
Yeah,
I'm doing this with my husband right now.
we are in the same house
We're
right
in the
now.
same house. You're above me, which is hilarious because I can actually hear you through.
That's good. That's awesome. Yep, yep. So we're here in the house, just doing the podcast, and yeah, it's interesting. It's unusual. It's unusual because we talk so much, and having this setup is a little bit unusual. But yeah, it should be fun. I'm looking forward to chatting.
Yeah, I actually kind of like that. It's true. We do talk a lot. And we've never talked from our respective offices before. I don't know.
Yes, we
I
have
kind of
not.
like it because then if I just want to like call you and be like, "Ayo,"
Yeah, I'm sure people are very interested in this part of the conversation.
you're so funny. This is the whole vibe, babe.
Okay, that's good.
I like how worried you are. It's so
I'm
cute.
not worried. I'm jumping into the pond. I'm not sure what to expect, so I'm
I
just
know. Yeah. And you're like
going where
very
I am.
focused. It's like, okay, what's the intention? What is the
Yeah,
objective?
I'm completely unprepared. I don't know what we're doing, so hopefully it goes well.
I love it. So I want to ask you, we come from different worlds. And I talk to a lot of people about what I love about our relationship. I talk about our relationship a lot. And I'm
Really? You
curious.
do? Okay.
Yeah, because I'm proud of it.
Okay. That's good.
That's good. I'm curious, in your mind, why do you think that we work so well together?
That's a good question. I sometimes think about it myself, but I think it comes down to a few things. The the first one is we have a foundation of shared values,
Mm.
just generally in life, I think.
Mm.
The
What do you think those
second,
values are?
well, those values, I think we are both very driven people. We are both very, we have integrity, I feel like. We both have very strong sense of what's good, and trying to do the right thing. I think it's really important to us. I feel like we really family people. We like to, build the family and our own place in life, and we're homebound in a way sometimes. We
Yeah,
are
we're
both, I think,
homebodies for sure.
introverts. We're both hidden introverts in a way, and I think there are a lot of other things around, like just uh, the first, like just around values fundamentally, and how we see the world and how we can communicate with each other. I think that's really important.
Mm.
The second element is our life goals are very aligned, I think, and I think we are openly able to discuss them, and generally we're very much pointing in the same direction. I think it's super important. And I think the third part is just communication. I think we have very strong communication about both good and bad. We are able to speak about issues, problems. We're able to communicate effectively. When we fight, we generally come to the same point where we are able to sit down and talk about it. And I think those are the three main factors that are making us work so well together.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that's definitely the two things that you mentioned for sure that I talk about a lot is communication styles. I feel like we have a really great way of communicating with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, like we may not be on the same page naturally, right? Like you said, like we're talking about, we have a lot of different reference points just growing up. And so sometimes it's not even about having a different point of view. It's about, because it's just about being informed of the details and of the information, because, for instance, like you might say something where I'm like, oh my goodness, but as we talk about it, which is wonderful that we can like have seemingly difficult conversations, but what I think is really what happens a lot in the world is just a lack of shared knowledge. And so the task at hand is not about judging on the offset. It's about putting in the effort to like have a productive conversation, right? So even if we're trying to figure out like, hey, how do we deal with the dishes? How do we deal with, the trash? How do we deal with certain things like that, right? It's kind of like, okay, I don't think we've ever actually said this, but we kind of more treat it as like a knowledge sharing exercise of like, okay, what do I want to happen? What do you want to happen? What's your perspective on how things happen? What's your perspective on how things happen? And then trying to understand where that compromise is, because we obviously want the same things.
Yeah, because of the aligned goals, I think that's
Right.
really, I think, what makes it work really well. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, 100%.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and the values for sure. I think I agree. I think the fact that we are very driven people, that we really value knowledge, that we really value global perspective. I mean, that was what made us connect when we first met.
Yeah, for sure.
In person, right? Because apparently we met digitally on email when we used to work together.
Yeah, definitely.
She told me afterwards.
Yeah.
It was a big email chain that I had to start, and Sark was on that.
Do people know how we met, actually? Do people know how the story?
We can talk about it.
I don't know if it's interesting or not, but I think it's just
interesting.
Curiosity.
It's kind of a modern tale, if you think about it.
Yeah. Yeah, we both used to work in the same company. I mean, I'm still in the company, but you used to work in the same company as me many years ago, and we just tangentially had worked on same projects together with different roles in different locations, and I just had spotted you through those exchanges. I remember the name and I remember the picture. But then we lost.
It was an iconic picture of mine.
Yeah, it was an iconic picture at the time because of the kind of you were jumping and you were really funny and being quirky and all that, which was really cool. And it was a very memorable picture, and I remembered it, and I remember the name. And then until many years later, we didn't really have an opportunity to interact. And then I think about 6 years ago or so, there was a party that our shared friend organized in LA. And we happened to be there together, and I remembered the picture and the name. I was like, "Oh, this is the person I remember from many years ago." And I came up to you, and we had a great conversation in Spanish, I think. And you were very surprised that I knew Spanish, and I think that kind of created a little of a connection there, and we had a really good interaction at that party. But and then until months later, nothing really happened because we were living our own lives. And one day, when we both got on Tinder, it happened to be that we saw each other, and we just connected there. Yeah, which is really cool, because I think it was just kind of very serendipitous thing that happened. It just was very casual, and then we happened to connect in person, and we got to know each other a bit deeper, and we really liked, I think, those things that we discussed, the values, the life goals, and just kind of how we saw things in general. And from there, I think it just grew from there, which was really, really awesome. And now we're married.
And now we're married. Flash forward.
with kids.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
Now I'm gonna fill in some details.
Okay, if you think they're important, then go ahead.
I think they're fun. So what's funny is that when we met at the party, at the get together, there was only like 6 of us there or 7 of us there at the time. We'd both come pretty early. And I remember seeing you, and you had this tight shirt on.
Like this, or
tighter? No, much tighter. You were like busting out of it.
Okay.
And you're very clean cut. And, and we're meeting in LA. I think that it's important as like a backdrop to understand that dating in LA is like a very interesting experience. And you're dealing with a lot of interesting industries in the area. And so, it's not atypical to find good looking people, but it is atypical to find like people who kind of check off all the boxes of kind of like mentally stimulating, physically good looking, emotionally mature, right? Like all these things. And I've admitted this to you that when I first saw you, I just kind of thought, oh, okay, here's just another guy who thinks he's really good looking. And I wasn't really interested. I wasn't even in that mindset. And I was just and admittedly, I was definitely judgmental. I would say I wasn't like, ugh, but I was definitely, just as a term of passive kind of scanning over everybody,
Mhm.
because you're a very good looking person.
Thank
Congratulations.
you.
You're welcome.
I don't think so, but thank you.
I'm
I think I'm
your
average looking, and I think you are good looking. So
Oh, stop. See, this is another
yeah,
reason it works. So, so
maybe.
but what's amazing is that you came up to me and you said, you were like, Pilar. And the way you said my name, I was like, because I know your name's Sarkhan. I was like, I wasn't expecting one way or the other, but I definitely wasn't expecting you to say my name so well in Spanish with a Spanish accent. And I was like, yes, see? And you were like, hablas español. And I was like, oh my goodness. So we started
Yeah.
speaking in Spanish. And I was so, and because I wasn't in that vibe at that time in my life, I wasn't open to, a new relationship. I wasn't open. I was just at that point in my life where I was just like kind
Hmm.
of having a bit of a breather. I was just willing to be present for having this interesting, like, whoa, what is this? And you were and I feel like men need to take stock in this, or like take a page from Sarkhan's unknowing book. But like genuine conversation is a massive asset. And when we were talking, we connected so hard on like so many different levels in terms of, the backgrounds of our family, traveling, relocation, having the global mindset. It's where we discovered a lot of our values, right? Just by
Yeah.
that is very uncommon for to find because of the fact that both our families moved around a lot, had to relocate, had to kind of create this central nucleus, and not really have extended family around, which creates a whole different kind of dynamic in values when you're growing up and you're trying to make something of yourself, but you don't have, this sort of network to lean on or to refer back to. It's in that conversation, we discovered a lot of that right up front.
Hmm.
And I just remember just having such a wonderful time talking to you without, and this is key, without any like sexual innuendos, without any sort of flirtation, without it was just you genuinely being interested in my story and my background, and likewise, right? And I think that that is so important that a lot of people don't really grasp or understand, and maybe even think it falls into like the nice guy category of like, oh, I'm interested, but you don't realize that when you find the right person that you're having that conversation with, it really is the difference between day and night. And I remember leaving that party, and we have a picture of us from that party. It was so fun. But I remember leaving that party and we didn't like exchange numbers or anything. I was just like, shit, I gotta go home. I have the babysitter. And I just remember leaving and just feeling like, oh my God, like I'm so happy that my friend has friends like that. I just remember, and I'm getting a little emotional about it because I was just so impressed by like the quality of human being that it was like feeling faith again in humanity. I was like, not realizing.
What have you experienced before that, babe?
Exactly. Not that it was like,
That's,
not like, I had lost any faith in humanity, but especially dating in LA or like just
yeah,
meeting
it's tough.
men
It's
in
tough.
LA.
Yeah, it's tough.
It's difficult. It's
Not just men,
definitely
just in general, dating in LA is pretty hard. It's a known fact.
it's a known fact.
Like,
This is a known
especially I
fact.
think nowadays. I think 10 years ago to now, I think it was a different world. Now with all the dating apps, it's so convenient. People just are
Yeah.
more superficial in the way they kind of look for, dates and partners and all that stuff. And I think it just creates this culture of where people are not really willing to necessarily connect on deeper level. They just look to have more dates. And I
Yeah.
think that culture is really could be toxic if you really want to find someone special, because people are not really looking for that in a online dating context.
Hmm.
And yeah, it could be hard. I
Yeah.
can I can see that. So I'm very happy we found each other.
Yeah. Same.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That was super fun. And I love though how, you know, when I'm talking, especially to like clients and, we're talking about relationships, I admittedly I refer a lot back to our own relationship because of how much we've learned, through the process of just, growth. And how you can grow as a person with uh, a supportive partner that ultimately serves your highest and greatest good, right? And I feel like um, you may not have all the answers up front in terms of what kind of partner you're looking for, but by virtue of like working on yourself, by virtue of being, open to new experiences, um, you ultimately just intuitively end up finding the right person. Right. What was
Yeah,
that? What
absolutely.
what was the experience like for you before meeting me? Like what was kind of your dating experience, your sort of mindset in relationships in general?
Well, I've always wanted to find a long-term partner. And I actually, when growing up, I was very insecure in my kind of like dating life, so to speak. And in my 20s, I was still finding myself a little bit in terms of who I am, what is my goal kind of in terms of having a partner, having a girlfriend, or having a wife. And I think I always had this idea that I want to have a family at some point in the future, but I never knew how because I had a lot of kind of insecurities deep down. And as I developed myself and my career and acquired more confidence and moved around quite a bit, I think that my approach changed because I wanted to first like basically try to cast net as wide as possible so I could basically find, just people. And obviously if you're an expat in a different country, the easiest way to find is going online and trying to find somebody through online dating apps. And that's what I kind of started doing when I moved to Ireland from Spain. And yeah, and I think then try to just basically, date people, but always looking for that. What is the match? What could be the match for me personally, and how can I offer something to this other person? And
Mm.
I think the biggest factor for me was this alignment of goals in life. It was really important. I realized how important it is because I was dating some girls that maybe were good in some areas, but the goals were completely different, right? And they just I felt it wasn't the right fit for me. And then
Mhm.
when I moved to the United States, it was the same kind of idea. In LA, it's a really big city. You kind of can get lost in the sea of people here. And for me, I was just doing the same thing. I was like, okay, how can I meet as many people as possible? And I found that meeting people outside of work was really helpful. So that for example, some group of people at work, but we meet outside to do some activities like, doing some, races together, maybe doing some workouts, maybe, going out on a hike, things like that. And I kind
Or
of started to build my
I mean,
network.
when you were in Ireland, when you lived in Ireland, it was going to the bar.
Going to the bar, yes, exactly. There was not much to do apart from that. It was very, very basic, very clear path to have a date there. It's all go to the pub. Okay, cool, got it. Yeah, and then slowly, I think I acquired just more confidence in myself and who I am, and I also started to feel that I had more clarity in my goals in who I want as a partner. And slowly I realized that another part, which is it's very hard to have goals and timelines on when you can meet someone because it's impossible to predict. You just have to be
Mhm.
open to it. You have to have an open mindset. You have to be confident in who you are. You have to be very clear about those goals and being very selective about who you choose to partner with for life.
Mhm.
But once I think I found you, I realized very quickly that it was a very good match in terms of those three elements that I described, in terms of how we thought about life, what were our goals, aspirations, what were our values. And immediately I realized that it's worth establishing deeper connection there.
Mhm.
So it was just kind of overall through experimentation, through having dates, through acquiring a better understanding of who I am as a person, what my goals are, having more confidence in myself, because in my 20s I didn't have as much confidence, and I think in my
Mhm.
30s I really became who I am in terms of, okay, this is who I am as a person and I can offer something, and I am also feeling confident in my ability to basically find people, and people will be happy to connect with me as well. I think that's a really important part of it, is just having that openness and confidence in yourself. And
Mhm.
then yes, I think that was kind of what led to finding you, thankfully.
Aw. Yeah, I mean, I love, like, the confidence part. Like, I think that that's so huge, working on yourself and having that confidence, and I think that there's sometimes a misunderstanding around what confidence means, right? Sometimes,
Hmm.
especially with men, I think that there can be a lot of misunderstanding around what confidence means. And because of, masculine energy and the social expectations of masculinity and what that means, it can kind of be hyperbolized and sort of caricaturized into this,
Hmm.
you know, take up room and be
Right.
forceful and like be the loudest person and be confident, right? When in reality, that's not real confidence. Confidence is actually like knowing who you are, right? It's
That's
not about,
exactly right. Yeah.
right, showing up with like a false sense of confidence.
Hmm.
And because it's a little cliche, but it is true. There is an overcompensation that's happening when you see those kind of personalities, and for sure, I've been guilty of that.
I would say it's probably a show of overcompensation for some insecurity. If you are kind of on a spectrum, you are basically being the caricature of that confidence in the mainstream understanding. Like, what does confident mean? You immediately think like, oh, somebody who is super strong and can speak loudly and
Hmm.
can dominate. That's
Yeah.
what mainstream kind of immediately jumps to you in your head when you think confidence. But it's actually the opposite of that. It's more
Mhm.
like you need to be more grounded. You need to be more aware of yourself, of what your weaknesses are, what your strengths are. You need to be basically confident in your body. You need to be confident in your space. And that
Mhm.
means that you also need to be vulnerable sometimes. And vulnerability is actually a big part of being confident, I think. And
Love
I
that.
think that sort of caricature is actually all opposite to that. It's more, no matter what, I'm going to be showing that I know everything and I'm
Right.
the most confident person in the room, which I think is actually the opposite, and it signals something that this person most likely has some sort of insecurity, most likely.
Mhm.
And I think it's actually a detractor for many people to interact with this kind of personality. And so that's I think it's a really good point you're making around kind of what confidence is and how you can develop it. I think it's really more about introspection and really evaluating yourself on a balance on, okay, I'm maybe really good at these things, but I'm actually really not so great at this, and I'm
Mhm.
okay with that, or I need to work on them. And
Mhm.
also just being comfortable in your environment, in your body, I think it's also another part of it, because I know a lot of people are insecure about some parts of their body, or like I can relate myself, because like obviously I don't have a lot of hair, and I remember for a long time I had a lot of insecurities with regards to like baldness and all that stuff, and it limited my ability to
Does it
to be
happen?
myself, quite
It
frankly.
started when you were relatively young.
Yeah, when I was like 17, 18 years old, and
Yeah.
then you can imagine growing up with that sort of insecurity and then people pointing at you with a finger, right? And I feel like that affected me in many ways, and that's actually what I think was part of the reason why I wasn't as confident, right, and in my body, and kind of like, can I actually succeed in in the relationships and things like that. But I think once you acquire that, you understand that this is actually not the most important thing, and actually you have to be okay with that and embrace it.
Mm-hmm.
Then you unlock a path for yourself. You're like, okay, I actually can do things, and you realize that confidence is not just about physical appearance.
Mm-hmm.
It's about how you feel and how you carry yourself in a lot of
Mm-hmm.
ways. So I think those are really important things to consider.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually it's interesting because if you're watching this and thinking like, well, do I have too much confidence? Do I have not enough confidence? I think that just talking about how you show up in a room and having a healthy amount of vulnerability, or being comfortable with a healthy amount of vulnerability, right? I think that actually you can probably determine based on your relationships around you, and the quality of the relationships around you. So whether you're a manager, you're not a manager, your friends, I think that if people are willing to be vulnerable with you as well, I think it's a good sign that you're coming across yourself as confident, but also comfortable with vulnerability. And
Yeah.
it's huge. That's huge because I think that a lot of times, especially like in work culture, the idea of confidence and what is a manager, what leadership position, there's a lot of intimidation, not necessarily intentional intimidation, but there is that idea of being intimidated by the boss, being intimidated by whoever is in that leadership position. But in reality, if you yourself are in a leadership position, I would ask you to ask yourself, right? Do I feel like people are presenting a healthy level of vulnerability with me in their times of need, right? Or trying to understand something, or asking questions, right? Not vulnerability as in like emotional vulnerability necessarily, but just, not being honest about not knowing something, being okay with asking clarifying questions. And that goes for, relationships, personal relationships as well.
Well, I think there is a parallel actually to that. So you can think about confidence on a spectrum, right? There is a healthy confidence, and then there is a toxic confidence.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the toxic confidence, there are some symptoms of whether the culture is toxic, and it's actually coming from the toxic confidence. It's this idea of fear culture, for example, where if you as a leader, the only thing you hear is everything is great, you know the most, you are the best, every decision you're making is the greatest decision ever. It could be a pretty strong red flag that most likely you are not projecting the right things to your organization and to your team,
Yeah.
because they are afraid to give you the actual feedback. They're afraid to speak up.
Because nothing's ever
And
perfect.
exactly. And so I think that is the sign most likely of more like toxic confidence,
Mhm.
for whatever reason. Maybe it's a behavioral thing, maybe it's something else. And I think on a positive side, as you said, a positive confidence is where you have a culture where people can actually unlock themselves and they can speak up and they feel free and they feel themselves and they feel that they can be vulnerable and they can be also honest with yourself as a leader. I think that is the sign that you are likely doing something right,
Mhm.
and the people are trusting that you will be open to basically be the right leader for them in terms of opening that culture and creating a culture more of innovation and ideas rather than fear. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, 100%.
And that
And
can translate to the relationships too. That actually is a
yeah.
very good barometer when you have a family where, maybe you have a figure that is creating that sort of fear, and instead of the support environment. I think you can also probably apply similar kind of framework to a family or to any relationship.
Oh, yeah. I mean, just the other day we were talking about how, I was telling you that a group of friends are going to be getting together on Sunday, and you kind of joked and you were like, "That's nice for them." And I just started laughing. And I was like, "Can you imagine if we were one of those couples where like one of like somebody's like honestly scared of asking the other person in the relationship, like, if it's okay for them to do something, right?" I'm like, "I can't imagine that." And you're like, I don't know what you're talking about. It was really funny. But it is one of those things where, yeah, if there's fear in the relationship, I think, and to be honest, to be fair, right? Like, I think I tell people, don't get bummed out when your relationship doesn't work out, because 9 out of 10 relationships, realistically, if you're looking at right, don't work out. That's how they're designed. You're not designed to just like only be with one person, right? Or yeah, like for the rest of your life. You're going to be like, oh, something here doesn't match, right? Because being intimate with someone is like a full, multidimensional experience. And so, but we're used to, and sometimes we trick ourselves into normalizing, oh, okay, like being in a relationship means that sometimes I'm going to be uncomfortable and just need to watch what I'm going to say, which, it's, there's one thing about being mindful. It's another thing when there's fear. And I was actually listening to this really interesting podcast this morning. It was talking about fear, and fear is actually worry, right? Like, what are you actually worried about? And in a relationship, it's so important that you're not worried about, like, am I going to lose this person? Is this person going to lose respect for me? Is this person not going to love me anymore? Is this person going to change? So, is who I am, do I have to be worried about who I am affecting this relationship? And yeah, I just think that's it's so important. And it's interesting with applying it to work, right? Because it's not necessarily a long-term relationship, especially in a lot of industries. You're talking about normal turnover of like 1 to 5 years, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
how do you express yourself in a healthy way and be vulnerable in a healthy way without being worried that it's going to reflect poorly on your
Right.
position?
Well, it's the whole idea of the peer culture versus a more
Mhm.
feedback and open culture where people can be themselves and they can be innovating and taking risks without fear of being reprimanded, right?
Mhm.
And I think that's kind of where companies that do it right, and the leaders who do it right, they generally have a much more productive, engaged team and organization. Versus if it's kind of fear-based, you generally see a drop in productivity or higher turnover rates, or just
Mhm.
generally people being less engaged and happy in their work and
Right.
treating it more as a job, and not so much they're not willing to go the extra mile to innovate and create something maybe unexpected, right? Which I think is really important in today's world where there's so much competition between companies and so on. So I think it's all of this is like a really good thread in terms of good leadership versus maybe bad leadership. And I think a lot of these things can be parallelized to real life and how
Mhm.
you can be, a good partner, a good father, a good friend, things like that.
A good
Not one to
family
one.
member. Yeah.
Yeah, not one to one necessarily, but I think a lot of the
Right.
mindset pieces are very similar.
Yeah.
Because say if you are as a leader open to feedback, generally speaking, not just on in your desires, but in your actions, generally speaking, that you would be also most likely to be a better partner because
Mhm.
then your partner would be able to give you feedback and have a great communication with you, and you can improve as a result of that, which then leads to healthy relationships.
Mhm.
But personally, actually, I found in my own journey, professional journey, I found that I was very green when I started, and I actually was very kind of close to feedback and very defensive. But as I progressed, I realized how important it is to self-improvement and that continuous evolution as a human and as a professional. And then it certainly translated into me being more confident when it comes to relationships as well, because I felt
Mhm.
like people were more open to partnering with me, to be in a relationship with me, to be friends with me. And I think
Mhm.
that's certainly a huge factor in relationships as well.
Absolutely. I mean, I've told you that, one of your greatest strengths is how well you're able to take feedback. Um, I don't know if I can say the same. I don't think I can, right, about myself. But you're incredible at taking feedback. And 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 I think that, on the whole leadership piece and how it translates to relationships, you have to be a leader in your own life. So in a lot of ways, it is very translatable. If you look at it from the perspective of you're in charge of your life, you're the CEO of your own life, of your own success, of your day to day, right? You're your own manager. You're the only person who's responsible for your success and for the creation of whatever it is that you want to make happen and materialize in your life. You have to be the visionary of that truth. And so if it's in individual relationships, if it's action items, if it's your routine, if it's whatever, right? Like you have to assume responsibility just as a CEO would assume responsibility for their company or a manager assume responsibility for their team.
Yeah, absolutely. +1.
Thumbs up. I love that. So in the company of our family, would you consider yourself the CEO or the president or?
I don't know exactly the difference.
I don't either. What is the difference between a CEO and president?
It's,
I guess CEO is more like.
I think I'm a co-founder.
Oh, I like that.
I think I'm a co-founder, and I think the other co-founder is on this call. So we're the co-founders, and I think we share many roles. I think it's in a family unit. I think it's always about wearing multiple hats. One day you are the CEO, another day you are the janitor. And you need to be flexible. And I think I think in our case, for important decisions, we always have a lot of communication, and we are true like co-CEOs in that regard. But in terms of like just the long-term vision, we're definitely co-founders because we are building this as a long-term enterprise for decades to come. And I think our visions are pretty aligned. So yeah, I would describe it that way.
That's smart. That's very smart. It's the co-founder. Wow, baby. That was really good. I love that.
That's why they pay me the big bucks, babe.
Yes, that is true. That is also very true. And one more thing that I want to talk about, because I think that it's very relatable, especially in these times. This isn't 30 years ago. This isn't our parents' generation. I think that it's interesting and to talk about your experience coming into a relationship with someone who already had a child.
Yeah, definitely. I think that was a big adaptation for me, and it was a big learning experience, and still is, to be honest, to this day. I think that generally I was growing up, especially in my 20s and my 30s, as a fairly, like, I was on my own, and I always catered to my own needs and to my own wants all the time. And it was, even having a partner was hard because I had to kind of always balance what I wanted to do versus what we wanted to do, or the person I was with wanted to do. And I think when we came to this relationship and you having Rafa, it was definitely a big adjustment for me because I didn't know fully how to interact, how to be, how to share, how to think about, like, even, things like just shared responsibilities and shared finances and shared space. Those things were really challenging for me because I was coming from basically being single to being now with someone who had kind of like a family already, and we didn't get to build it necessarily from scratch together. It was kind of semi in the progress stage already. So it was very interesting. But overall, I think what really made it work for us was this idea of, again, common aspirations, common goals. And I think that allowed me to see things and be more flexible, just like being more flexible, because I'm very regimented. I'm very routine based. I'm very organized. And I think the
Mhm.
biggest adaptation for me was this idea that things are always dynamic and in change and in flux. And when you have a kid, things will be even more in flux and change. And I just had to make a leap of faith initially to say, I'm going to commit to this. I'm going to try this for several months. And if it doesn't work, then doesn't work. But if it
Mhm.
works, I think it's going to be amazing, has the potential to be incredible.
Mhm.
And thankfully, the latter scenario played out, where I think I started to build a great relationship with Rafa. We connected obviously really well, and we started kind of building something together. And I think now, 6 years later, I feel that I have a son now because we are so close together, and we have a very special relationship that is different from the one you have with him.
Mhm.
And I feel this was really worth it now, right? But certainly at the beginning, it was the first year, and like the first 2 years, they were hard. I mean, it's still hard to some extent, but it's a lot easier now.
Mhm.
So I would say it was just a journey of adaptation to being first a person who is coming to a family unit rather than building it from scratch. Second, becoming a father figure for a almost a preteen, right? Which I
Yep.
think is very different than say you come in and you
When they're
had a
young.
newborn. You had a newborn because you get to kind of build that life together, right? And I think it was a big interesting journey, but I think it made us all better as a result. And certainly, I feel a lot more equipped to be a father now than I was 6 years ago. So yeah, and thank you for that. I think it was a very very cool and enriching experience for me personally. I hope as well for us as a family.
Yeah. I'm going to try to not get emotional talking about this, but um yeah, I mean it takes time. I think that that's something that a lot of people need to understand is that time component. And that
Yeah.
it is difficult with older kids. But and that was something that you and I talked about a lot was just kind of like the fact that like Rafa's brain is not fully developed, right? Like,
Hmm.
and it's different building a relationship with an adult than it is
Yeah.
building a relationship with a child than it is with a preteen, like you said. So there's a lot of misconception, like on the outside, you can think, oh well, this kid's talking to me, we're having a conversation. They understand more, right? Than but the reality is that they don't, right? They
Mm.
actually still have a very limited view on life. They still have very limited experiences, very limited emotional range or like self-awareness in that emotional range. And that was something that we had to work through in the beginning was just kind of like,
Yeah.
how do you talk to me versus how do you talk to Rafa? And realizing that like that those are different kinds of conversations. And it's not always obvious what kind of conversation needs to happen from the child's perspective, you know?
Yeah, for sure. No, it was a huge kind of life-changing experience for me in many ways. And I think the part that made it really difficult and frustrating was that we had a very different like lifestyles in a sense, and like I just couldn't understand certain things why they were happening, uh, and like
Right.
why is everything so disorganized? Why is you
Which
know
I need to tell people, okay, our definitions of disorganized are like very different in the sense that yes, disorganized, but when you think disorganized, you're like things are not in their place. Things are happening last minute. Why are things happening last minute? And that was a whole thing that we had to kind of
yeah.
onboard you on was like having a family. There's like 80% of the things are going to be last
Well,
minute.
that was a big one. Then the other one was just why is Rafa is doing the same thing that is wrong so many times in a row, right? I just couldn't
Why is it
understand
taking him so long to realize
why
you're
is
not
it.
supposed to do it that way?
Yeah, so things like that. But I think over time it just kind of worked out because first of all, I think Rafa grew so much, and I think I was also happy to see my influence on that, which is super awesome. Which I think what fathers are here for is to really set up their kids for success and like be that figure of inspiration and also support, but also sometimes being a little bit harsh when you have to be. And I think it was really cool journey from that perspective. And I feel like we're definitely now in a position where it's so healthy in terms of like a relationship, and I feel like it was just a learning experience for me, just to go from the first time we met and kind of started living together and all that, to now where I feel we are true family. And that is part of the long-term project of enterprise, Pilar and Sark family, or whatever you call it.
Yeah, totally. And it was a huge learning curve for me, because here I am, I'd been a single mom for like 10 years but like in the extreme, where I had help from my family when Rafa was first born. But as soon as, I was finishing my degree, and as soon as I finished my degree, Rafa was like a year and a half or something, and I immediately moved. I moved to where I had no friends or family, and then I moved again to another place, no friends or family, moved again, no friends or family. So I was really used to like being the creator of our destiny and really controlling tone and time and environment. And I was in mi salsa, right? Like, as we say in Spanish, like estuve en mi salsa. I was definitely like, I felt really comfortable. And when I talk to people about having been a single parent, I'm like, I loved it. Like, I loved it. Are you kidding me? I could make so many poor decisions and nobody judged me. Nobody was like, what are you doing? And I was working. I was a total workaholic. I worked way too much. Rafa would, come to the office with me after hours and fall asleep on the carpet, right? Like, there was just so many things that like a normal couple, they would be like, what are you doing that's crazy, right? Like, you're not being responsible, or you're not thinking about your child. But we also made it
hardened him.
It hardened him, exactly. To me, I was doing not just the best I could, but I was being a really good influence on him in terms of like showing him certain ethics and values, and again, control, right? I was the controller of everything. And it also really strengthened our relationship with each other, which was also a form of control. And I see all of those things now. And I think that that's something that we do out of protection. Single parents, we, when we're in that mode, or when we're in a matriarchy, or, in reality, like it's a point of pride for, I think, a lot of us, because we feel like we can be protectors and we can be esteemed protectors. Our children think that we're little gods, right? So it's like there's a whole sort of ecosystem that we kind of create for ourselves in order to protect ourselves. And I certainly didn't have an issue dating people, but, introducing people to my son was obviously like, I was really clear, and a lot of that was around, obviously, finding the right people, what mindset was I in, and just being really honest about all those things. And then when you came into my life, right, it was very clear, like, we have, again, those values, the communication style. There was so much that we didn't feel like we had to work out, because we had those values that was huge, that really informed a lot. So even when there was disconnect, even when there was those moments of like, what the hell is this? Even if it was like really off-putting at first, we knew how to talk to each other and talk through it, and how to, again, fill in those knowledge gaps to come to like a peaceful resolution and a compromise. And but for me, it was really difficult, just like giving power over to somebody. But also, as a single mother, not just a single parent, but as a single mother, the tone is very different when you're when you're the only parent. You can be strong, you can be like, a very strong female, but you're influencing the way you're talking, the way, all of these things. It's more has a feminine quality to it, right? And when someone comes in and now they demonstrate more masculine qualities, for me, that was very difficult. And
I remember.
Yeah. And while, I'll still say that there was definitely a compromise we did realistically have to make because of, tone and of course understanding like how does a child's brain work and what's actually an effective way to talk to a child. The reality is that just overall foundationally you just have a more masculine tone, and that was something that I had to kind of relinquish control on, that there will now be balance in the house. And so I had to learn how to invite balance while also keeping that open door for feedback, right? And you would even give me the feedback of like, well, you're always really soft with him, which I had never considered myself soft with Rafa. But when I saw how you would communicate with him and how you would put expectations on him, I was soft. I would always have an opportunity for conversation, always an opportunity to, for there to be a better understanding. Whereas you would be like, no, you either did it or you didn't do it. And if you didn't do it, and I would always think, yeah, like I do that too. I'm just better at communicating. I would tell myself these stories, right? When in reality, it was just that it was a different style. And I had to learn that. And that was, so I'm really grateful for that, because I didn't realize that that was something that I needed to work on and
That's cool.
trust the process, which,
You never told me that, actually. It's the first time
really?
you're telling me. Yeah, I think so.
I think so.
In these words,
Right.
so that
No,
I can
definitely.
understand.
Yeah. And these words for sure. Yeah, that's true. No, I've definitely, yeah. And I think it's something that we've naturally I think it's part of the reason why we're successful now, is because we have a really good balance in parenting structures. But yeah, it's possible. So anybody out there who's like, either a single parent or in the a single non-parent, and you're older and you're realizing like, wow, everybody's got kids, like we hope this helps you. There's hope.
If it helps any person, that's objective achieved.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah, totally. So yeah. Is there anything you would like to add, mi amor?
So to all my fans and subscribers, no, thank you. It was fun. It was fun. I really enjoyed the conversation. It's almost like having conversation in the kitchen, just the more formal.
Yeah, because we have
thank
a
you
lot
for
of
having me on your podcast.
You're
Really
welcome,
appreciate
mi
it.
amor. Yeah, I love it because we have a lot of these types of conversations.
Have like daily podcasts, basically.
We do. And I'm always thinking, I'm like, I need to record this. I should be recording this conversation because we have really good conversation. So that's just basically saying that this isn't going to be the last time you're on.
Oh, okay, good. Sounds good. All right. If it gets 5 views, we're gonna do another one.
I love it. You're definitely the YouTube pro. Like,
if it gets 5 likes, smash the like button, and we're gonna do another one.
Excellent. You're so much better at this because I'm like, whatever, it's fine. And you're the YouTube pro. You consume a million times more content.
Ungodly amounts of videos.
Ungodly amounts of videos. This is true.
All right.
All right. I love it. Okay. Excellent. Thank you, everybody, for watching, for listening. And if you haven't already, please, subscribe, hit that like button. And yeah, I hope you have an amazing day. And I hope you find love, success, and clarity in everything that you do.
All right. Cheers, everyone. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.